Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Cancer Convo series. My name is Katie Campbell, and I am 32 years old, living with stage 4 breast cancer. And I've written a book called The Courage Club, where I talk about my own experiences with cancer and trying to build a meaningful life in the middle of something like cancer. But I'm super excited to have my guest with me today, Isabel Abbott, and to hear from her and her experiences. She is a birth and death doula, which I just love. She's from Chicago, and I'm just going to let her introduce herself and take it from here. So tell us about yourself, Isabel.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for having this and for doing this. I'm Isabel. I'd been doing the work that I do in my late 20s, and then at the age as a birth doula, and then at the age of 30, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. The way it was found was they were removing an ovarian cyst, and during that process is when they realized that I also had cancer. So I woke up from what I believed had been a pretty low-key surgery to realize that I had a cancer diagnosis and had had a radical hysterectomy without knowing, because I was unconscious in general anesthesia. So it was sort of a thrust into it. For me, sort of circumstantial fortunate piece is that because they were in to do another surgery, they caught it as soon as they did. Knowing that ovarian cancer, it has very few symptoms, right, until it is often quite far progressed. So they were able to catch it at 1C. So it was a pretty quick, like, boom, boom, boom. You don't have a uterus, immediate surgical menopause, and then a lot of testing to see sort of where everything else had been, and then radiation treatment. So I had a 2-year-old son at the time, and I felt very, very young, and I just remember how much I kept thinking that, like, I'm not equipped to do this now, or this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing at this age. Like, later, sure, right, but not now. Like, I have a 2-year-old, so I even have a lot of memories of that, both in going through menopause and really just wanting to go into the woods by myself for a very long time, and instead having a young one to take care of was for me a real challenge. I did have it. It was a real challenge. And then really changed some of the work. Then there was a period of time in there where I did not want to attend births as a birth doula. I had too much. I was in too much of a relationship with my now removed womb to sort of be in that realm. So I took some time off during that time to heal. And in many ways, I think it also allowed for some changes in my life that I can look back now and feel really grateful for. I don't feel grateful, actually, that I had cancer. I just don't. I don't feel gratitude for it. I wish I had just never had it. Yeah. And I just do. And I ended up, getting a divorce, finding more meaningful work, and really deeply embedding myself in my own life. So it sort of changed some of the ways in which I lived that for me felt like I gave myself back to myself. Mm-hmm. And for that, it was tremendous. So that was when I was 30, and then reached the 5-year mark of being cancer-free, and then 2 years ago was diagnosed, so at 38 was diagnosed with vaginal cancer. Mm-hmm. So that was also treated surgically, primarily surgically. So I am now, and at this point, don't show cancer, but I'm now at the point again of starting the clock over of like, okay, now we're just, now I have this 6-month test, and that's a good, and now I have this, just the testing a lot. And so that's sort of the technical parts, right, of sort of my cancer diagnosis in terms of what it where it took me, or what I came to know that I wouldn't have known otherwise. I think I just was so struck, even in the process of being in it and being in treatment and just sort of reconciling myself to a lot of vulnerabilities of embodiment, like just how horrifically vulnerable it all felt in aspects I don't control and never did, and feeling very confronted with that. Was There were many ways that I responded that were not what I would have expected. Even like I sort of pride myself on a kind of self-awareness. Like, I know myself, I know what I need, all of those things, and to be in a place where I was making decisions that were a surprise even to me was humbling in a really ultimately powerful and liberating way for me, because it took off a lot of assumption, and I got to be an unknown to myself again, and it sort of fundamentally changed the way I think I interact with others in the world, which is I don't know. I don't know what one should do. I can be with, which is a lot of my work now, right, as a doula, both in end of life as well as in birth work. So I can be with, but I just truly don't know what another should do, and I don't know that we always know up until the moment when we're doing it. So the idea of grand strategic plans was no longer as relevant or compelling to me, I would say. And I came to have a great and profound respect for what I would call bodily integrity and bodily autonomy. And in the end, I don't get to control a lot of what happens to it, right? But it is mine. It is my body. So that I get to decide and make those decisions became very important. And just learning how to navigate others who had differing ideas as to what would be best for me, and really kind of claim and reclaim and center in the bodily integrity that this is mine, and so long as I'm here, this is my home.
I'm really struck by your story. I can't imagine waking up to discover, particularly when you're talking about making decisions for yourself and your own body, like what it was like to have someone else make a decision like that for you to get a radical hysterectomy. How did that?
It was stunning. I was grateful to, or I just felt fortunate that my son's father, so my husband at the time, was the one who made that decision. He gave the go-ahead to the surgeons. And that is, though we had never had that specific conversation, we had had enough conversations that he made the decision I too would have made. So had I been woken up and they said, this is what we think, we can do this, or we can wait and try some things and go back in later, I would have said, no, please take it out immediately. That is also the decision I would have made. So that felt, I had that, and I was grateful for that, and still I didn't get to make the decision, and the profound psychological effect of that, of coming to and realizing, it was a trauma, right? It's just a trauma.
It's a trauma whether you get to make the decision or not, and probably even more so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just without knowing, and just the unconsciousness part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So were you a death doula before you got cancer?
I had done some palliative care work, and it really, in the process of having cancer and meeting a lot of other young people as well, then I think that moved me more in that direction. And so having people that I loved who have had cancer who, that I was there then when they did pass. And so that, and being in a different relationship with myself over what I would want that to look like for myself really moved me more into that work. And that looks really different now depending on the individual, and whether it's an individual or whether it's supporting a family. And similar to birth work in the sense that it's a life transition, as well as oftentimes navigating medical systems.
Right.
That you are not prepared, like you just, don't know because why would you know? And then you're thrust into them. And dealing with the system part can be so daunting and overwhelming.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to think about the parallels. My mother was a midwife when I was growing up, and I've just recently started learning a lot about death doulas, and thinking about the parallels between birth and death is super interesting to me. But I would just love to hear. I think the I think that as a culture we have a really hard time with death, and and so I would just love to hear your perspective, kind of like your take on from your
Mm.
experience being a death doula and having a life threatening illness and um, what is your take on death now? Like how do you feel like you look at it differently than maybe most people do?
I have, I would say it's the work itself has grown my respect for that no one way to do it. Just like I don't think there's any one way to live. I don't think there's any one way to make decisions, medical decisions or decisions about the body. And I don't think there's just one way to die or to even die well. And so just sort of seeing a range of what that can look like and how individuals' lives and beliefs, right, really affect that. So I would say it has more grounded me in what my own sort of beliefs and orientations are, as a secular humanist. So for me, that really grounds in this life, and being with others who have really significant and meaningful and profound belief, right, in being held in something larger than themselves, in what that transition and passage will look like, and being really in the liminal space of having to acknowledge this is my belief and I don't know. It is the unknowable, is what I would say. I just don't know. So there's a lot of humility in that of just, I have belief and I don't know is the answer. So I think it just gives me a posture of, it has grown my comfort with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
If I think about my own death, I'm scared. It is a true statement.
Yeah.
It has not allowed me to be um, embracing in a sort of detached kind of way. It just hasn't. It's made me deeply in love with being here, and my life. And yes, I have fear around it, uh, and I know what I want, and it is presence. And so what I want at the end is what I want. Now I want presence, and I want to be loved, right? I want to be loving and be loved. And yes, I would say that, and just the respect for all the different ways that can look, as opposed to a cliche, or not to say that's not true for some people, right? But that people suddenly become wise
Mm-hmm.
when they're dying, that they suddenly have capacities, right? And I have not found that to be true. So just to be in reality is ultimately the most relieving thing, where then I can sort of relax, and and be with the unknown, but it still remains for me an unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really beautiful. I think when I think about obviously when you have stage 4 cancer, you end up thinking about death a lot. And I think that I'm much more afraid of of all of the things that you could lose control over. Like much more afraid of kind of like pain and suffering and things like that. And I think that's one of the things that's so intriguing to me about the notion of a death doula is somebody to act as like an advocate for you in that, and to bring in things like presence and love and make those the priorities as opposed to like what I think are normal priorities in death in America, which is like keep them alive 1 second longer, or or keep their
Yes.
pain, keep them super drugged, or whatever it is. Um, but I found that through connecting with the idea of death, that it is this like um, you you are also connecting with the idea of living. Like those two things are two sides of the same coin. And so, yeah, just it's really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else? So I guess what advice would you have for for a young person who's just been newly diagnosed, like what's the one thing that kind of got you through that you would give to somebody else?
I would, yeah, I would say it was allowing in myself a lot of permission, right? So it was just like permission for the experience to not look a certain way.
Hmm.
So, for example, I remember, and this is in the days, like I've woken up from surgery and now it's just doctor after doctor after doctor, and I'm so young. And so it's like more doctors, like, why did this happen? And now I become a source of interest,
Yeah.
and less of a person, and like all of those things that were happening. And the word lucky was used a lot, right? So people, the doctors would come in and they say something like, oh, you're so lucky, you're so lucky. And at that moment, I was like, well, I quite frankly don't feel lucky. I can acknowledge this is a preferable option given some other options, and yet, like, no, I don't want any of it. And so, sort of giving myself permission to have my experience, I found super useful instead of feeling required to take on the experience other people were having or other people wanted me to have in many different ways. I think some people wanted me to be really angry when I wasn't, and some people wanted me to feel like very filled with light when I didn't. So it just was like, no, I'm going to have my experience and allowing that. And then I also, and this was a real process for me of learning, but I did find it really useful to move more and more towards really specifically asking for what I wanted and needed.
Yeah.
And just asking. And if the answer is no, okay. And then there are other places that support can happen, or how can we find a way that this works for both people. But to sort of, there was a lot of grief and anger I had in my initial, like, I wanted people to just know. I just wanted them to know what to do, and I that's just what I wanted. And so I had a big around that for a while. And then also I found it useful to say, okay, what do I want and what do I need, and to ask for it. And then let people, when they can and in the ways they can, actually meet the need. And that process also helped me distinguish what only I can do.
Yeah.
So my experience ultimately is mine to be with. And yet there were many, both emotional and really practical things that people could do. They just needed to be asked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really true. Great advice. So where can folks find you and your work and
Mm-hmm.
all of that?
Well, I live in Chicago, so I do, obviously in-person work here, and then I do some forms of support for folks online in different capacities as well, and not just local. But all of that you could find just at my website, which is my name. So it's isabelabbott.com, which is ISABELABBOTT.com.
Okay, perfect. And I'll put it at the end of the
Okay.
video too. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
So much.